Oh, yeah.
Oh! You did it. You made it again. Pick it up. Yeah. Trying to roll through it.
Oh, you. That's you dancing there. Okay. Good morning. Good morning, Timothy. Nice to see you dancing. Good morning, that you are in Clubhouse right now with us, and to everybody watching us and probably Facebook as well. Pleasure to have you with us. It is May the 12th, 2024, and we are marking another milestone in this podcast. So, this is the 117th episode of Japanese Politics 101 with Timothy Langley, the CEO of Langley Squire, the consultancy, the only one, consultancy firm in Tokyo, downtown Tokyo. So, Timothy, thank you for being with us. And I'm not going to keep anybody waiting anymore. So, I'll give you the screen, maybe the word as well, maybe the floor as well, who knows. So, yes, here we go. It's on you now.
Thank you very much, Maya. Your microphone sounds a little bit like you've been drinking too much.
Oh, really? Oh, well, I
Yeah.
was actually, yes, yesterday.
Okay. I don't know. When we were preparing for the show, your voice was much clearer, but now there seems to be an echo or something. Maybe it's just me. But in any event, let's get started with the show. 170 together, Maya. Is that incredible? 170 episodes every Sunday. We're here to report on what's going on in Japanese politics that's important to those people who in our audience.
Thank you for the consistency, the persistence, and everything, because it's on you. You know how it is, how it goes every morning.
Maya, I'm reporting from the sailing port of Hota. It's on the Chiba coast that faces into Tokyo Bay. It's a little bit overcast today. It's probably, I'm not sure, it's supposed to be a good sailing day today. The port is full of very few sailing vessels, so people didn't come in yesterday on a Saturday and spend the night like I did. But probably the port will be filling up with people who are traveling just to come in for lunch or to take a bath or something like that. Oops.
Are you okay?
I just lost my my gooseneck. So my gooseneck is not cooperating with me. Oh, gosh.
Okay.
Okay. Is my camera still on?
The camera is still on, yes. And you're there. We can see you there.
Struggling?
The question is, yes, how long you can be there.
Okay. Oh, gosh. Okay. Well, let's see what happened. Okay. So, where are we now? So, the 170th episode, and thank you very much for those of you who joined us for the Tim and Dan show on Thursday. Dan and I reported on what's going on in the Kishida administration following the kickback scandal and his trip to his Golden Week trip. He came back from Paraguay last week and immediately called a session of his closest advisors. He came in from the airport, didn't waste any time, directly from the airport into the meeting to talk about the reform commission that he set up to deal with the kickback scandal and the ethics violations that were generated. Are you okay, Maya?
Yes. How about you? I think
I can hear you mixing drinks in the background.
Absolutely, yes. And also I can hear the wind that is blowing all around you. So hopefully, yes, if you move the mic, it will be
how's that?
Better.
Oh gosh. Okay, I'm really being challenged today. Okay. So thank you for joining the Tim and Dan show on Thursday. If you're interested in viewing that, Maya, you finished doctoring up that video so that it's a little bit tighter. Is it uploaded yet?
No, it isn't. It's going to be uploaded tomorrow on YouTube. Yes.
Okay. So for those of you who can view that, it's there you go. Thank you, Maya. It's Dan and I talking about what is confronting the Prime Minister right now. Every week is different. Sometimes our predictions don't come true in the way that we had foreseen them, but that's just because it's Japanese politics. And let me tell you, I mean, things are moving so rapidly nowadays. It's amazing the pace and the scale of change. The LDP has not changed this dramatically since its inception, and the prime minister is pretty much kind of on the ropes. He's got ethics violations that he has to confront, he has to deal with. And the opposition party, in light of the defeat of the 3 by-elections 2 weeks ago, is really loading up for bear. And it's not just the Constitutional Democratic Party, which won all 3 of those seats. It's also the other opposition parties who are coalescing. They're bringing together similar ideas. They're joining forces. The most obvious confrontation right now, well, there are actually 2. The first one is how the LDP plans to reform itself, and they came up with a proposal that they had to pass through their coalition partner, Komeito. This happened on Thursday, so there was a lot of press interest about that, and Komeito is really holding the LDP's feet to the fire. It is saying you need to be more transparent, and you guys are all about money and politics. And we, Komeito, your coalition party, don't agree with that, and we are diminished as a result of it, even though we're in a coalition with you. So, clean up your act. So they came up with a raft of proposals. And the reason why this negotiation between Komeito and LDP is so important is because once they finish what they, between the 2 of them, can agree upon, then they have to promote it to the public and to the opposition parties at large. If push comes to a shove and there is a vote on reforming the law that guides the collection of political funds, it goes into the diet, which the Prime Minister promised he would do this session. There are less than 2 months left in this session. If the Prime Minister intends to do that, he needs to put it for a vote. Between the LDP and Komeito, they dominate what the votes are in both houses. So if the opposition party doesn't agree with it, they can just stick them in the eye with their finger and say, well, we're going to do it this way. The problem is the optics and the reaction from the population about that. And the population is really not inclined to think favorably of the LDP, as we saw in the by-elections. And in the by-elections, there was only one race that pitted the Constitutional Democratic Party against the LDP, and that was in Shimane, where the LDP had held power for 15, 20 years. And in fact, it was not just the Speaker of the House who held that seat, but he was also the leader of the Abe faction for a 15-year period. So it's important that the LDP was so strong there for such a long period of time, and they lost. And they lost because of the kickback scandal and because of a lot of other things that were going on in the LDP at the current point in time. So the opposition parties, actually, they allowed the Constitutional Democratic Party to run a one-on-one race. They didn't insert any other candidates from any other party, so it was just the LDP and the Constitutional Democratic Party. In the other 2 races, there were other candidates. In Tokyo, there were about 11 candidates or 9 candidates vying for their power there, and the LDP didn't have a candidate in that race, and nor in Nagasaki. So the indications of how the public views the Prime Minister and the cabinet and how they would tend to vote if given the opportunity, for example, in a general election of the lower house, is not looking very good. So this reform panel set up by the Prime Minister in coalition with the Komeito came up with their draft proposals on Thursday, and nobody's really happy about it. They've come up that many of the pundits have said that it's half-baked. It does part of one thing, but it doesn't follow through. The amount of money that is being reported as being collected from supporters, and how political support groups can share money within different support groups, and how much money they give to their the Diet members who belong to their political party. So for LDP members, they get $1,000,000 every month with no ties attached to it. They don't have to report on it. They don't have to say how they've spent it. and the opposition parties are saying this is ripe for abuse, and we want to know how the Diet members spend this money, a 1 million yen a month, in addition to their salaries, in addition to everything else. This is something that's given to them as a factor of them being a member of the parliament. We want to know, and I think there's been some concession on that. There's been less concession on, for example, these political parties that I attend and other people attend every month, or sometimes every week, sometimes several times a day. They cost around Nima N, 20,000 yen per entry, and usually you get a dinner or a breakfast, lunch with that, and then a briefing. If you bring 10 people with you, then your name needs to be reported as a political fundraiser, and they want that number to be lower. A lot of people can attend these meetings. They're not reported as being participating in political funds or in political briefings, but it is one of the bones of contention. So there's a lot to be done there. It's not all said and done. Only the LDP and Komeito have come up with the proposals that they're going to try and sell to the rest of the parliament and to the Japanese population. That will become more of a flaming issue this week, starting tomorrow. So stay tuned to that. Also, it's not quite in the news so much right now, but the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia will be visiting Japan in about 10 days. He'll be here for a two-day visit. He will arrive on next Monday. He'll be here for 2 days. He'll have a lunch with the Emperor and the Empress. He'll meet with Mr. Kishida, 2 days of meetings. It's a pretty big deal to have the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia visit Japan. I don't think it's happened for, half a dozen years. So it's a pretty big deal. We'll report on that. And just getting into a little bit more of the fallout from the by-elections, it has really impacted the LDP, Mr. Kishida, the Constitutional Democratic Party, Ishii Koike, the governor of Tokyo, and even Mr. Mori, who is the former prime minister. One of the things that happened as a consequence of the Constitutional Democratic Party winning in these three by-elections is that the complexion of votes and the balance of power within the lower house has changed. Not only has the LDP decreased their number by 3, but one of the opposition parties, and it's important that just one of them won the 3 seats, one of the opposition parties gained 3 seats. And so throughout the Diet, in the various committees, the calculations of how many seats each party gets in these committees has been altered. And the most important one for our purposes right now is the Ethics Committee. The Ethics Committee was the committee that was kind of hammering the LDP. We want to know more about what was going on, ethics violations. The Prime Minister should be more transparent. And you'll remember that the Prime Minister actually showed up, uninvited, unannounced. He showed up one day to give his own testimony about the kickback scandal, hoping that would kind of quell the temperature and make people a little bit more accommodating to his view on what happened with the kickback scandal and what he intends to do with it. It didn't quite work. This was before he left for Washington, D.C. And now the Ethics Committee, it's a committee of 27 members. Previously, the Constitutional Democratic Party had 8 members. That's less than 1/3 of the 27. And unless you have 1/3, you can't make any kind of demand to the chairman for what should happen in the committee. You can make these demands, but if it comes to a vote, the combination of the LDP and Komeito will shoot it down. So even in today's world, the Constitutional Democratic Party has insisted for 44 members of the LDP to show up at the Ethics Committee to testify about the kickback scandal. It was all pretty much swept under the rug, you might remember earlier, but now they have 9 members in that committee, and they can make a demand. The LDP can decline that demand, but it looks really bad. The optics are very poor for the opposition to say we would like to hear more about the kickback scandal from these people who have already admitted their guilt. They've already revised their tax accounting. Everybody knows who they are, but they have been not prevented. They don't want to make any testimony. They don't want to be any more in the news. They're afraid about their own election possibilities. So they want that to not happen. So the Constitutional Democratic Party, in combination with the other opposition parties, has floated that demand. And let's see what the chairman of the committee does. Whatever his decision is going to be, it's going to implicate, his guidance received from the prime minister. So it's not a good time to be the Prime Minister Kishida these days. Let me see what else is going on. So one of the among the 44 members that they want to testify, obviously they will insist on the testimony of Mr. Mori, who was the former prime minister, and many say was the individual who concocted this idea in the first place 20 years ago. Whenever you see his name being mentioned on TV, it's almost always nowadays. It used to be with a cane, but now it's in a wheelchair. So I think he's going to plead that he has a medical condition. He can't testify. He can't be bothered by this kind of testimony because he's ill. I think that's what's going to happen. But the real key feature is, how this whole thing happened and how it was managed. Currently, the accountant for the Shizuoka, the Abe faction, has been in trial. He was, giving testimony Thursday. He has pled guilty to kind of hiding the funds, doing what he was told to do. And in the current law, if something like this happens, it is the accountant's fault. It's not the people's fault who gave him the orders or the people who received the money. It is the accountant's fault. So this old fellow who's been an accountant for the Abe faction for about 4.5 years, when he was hired, he was told by the predecessor, this is how we do things. This is what you're supposed to do if you want to keep this job. This is how things run here. And that's what he was doing. So one of the demands, in addition to revealing how people spend their 1 million yen every month, is that there is a guilt by association. So it's not just the fault of the accountant if something like this goes wrong. It is actually the people who are in charge, the diet member who is receiving the money and giving guidance to the accountant. But that's not the way the law is now. So the prime minister promised once again that he's going to fix it this session. I don't know. That's a big step forward. Let's see how that happens. Also, this week, the economic security bill passed the upper house. It is now going to be law in the next year, the next fiscal year. There was not a lot of opposition to it. It sailed through pretty quickly through the lower house last month. The vote came to the upper house. There wasn't a whole lot of opposition to it. What this bill allows the government to do is classify certain information, economic information, that it deems to be of security, having security value. And for the people to participate or to receive that information, they have to go through a kind of a vetting process. And certain people will be prevented from knowing this kind of economic information, and other people will have exclusive access to it. So it's it's a security classification system that is going to be implemented. It is drastically going to change the way information is handled. It's going to be a big impact if you want to be participating. If you're a director of a company or a president of a company and you have access to this information, you have to go through a vetting process, and you have to follow certain protocols in order to access the information, to store it, to save it, to share it, that sort of thing. So it's a pretty big deal, and it's going to have implications in the near future. There are a couple of, in an environment like we have today, the last thing the prime minister wants is some sort of a scandal, somebody doing something with their mistress or taking money. There are two ministers of state that are in a little bit of hot water. It's received some attention. The Prime Minister, they have both apologized. The Prime Minister hasn't said too much about it yet, but he has instructed them to clean up their act. The first one is with the Defense Minister. You might have seen the drone video of one of the Japanese helicopter aircraft carriers in port. And this video was shown on social media in China, and the Japanese picked it up and they analyzed it and they realized that it was actual footage, and they don't know how it was shot or who shot it, that sort of thing. And it just brings lots of things into question. So, the Japanese are trying to be more prominent in the security area, in the military area. They want to be included in Five Eyes and with the Australians as well. So to have a drone fly by and do, video surveillance of a military ship is pretty striking. So the Prime Minister chastised the Defense Minister for that. And the second one was the Environment Minister, who, in a meeting with Minamata disease patients, what was it, in May 1st, it was just maybe 12 days ago, in a hearing that he had there, what they did was they cut off the mic of people who were in testimony to the minister because they had run over their allotted time. And apparently this was really received poorly, that they kind of forcibly, they gave them a limited amount of time. They had something to say and their mics were cut off. And so the Prime Minister told the Economic Minister to clean up that, the Environment Minister to clean that up, to apologize, and for the entire government to be a little bit more sensitive to the needs of the population. So you can see that although the kickback scandal has a direct impact in certain specific areas, it also has a lot of spillover effects. And should there be an election called by the Prime Minister, or as a consequence of a no confidence motion, the LDP is really in troubled waters, as Dan and I alluded to just on Thursday. The other issue that's come up is we had the 3 by-elections, and now there's a governor's race in Shizuoka. You'll remember that the governor for Shizuoka resigned, maybe 2 weeks ago, because it was said he told the new members of the bureaucracy, the governor's office that were joining, they had just graduated, they were hired by the governor's office, and now they're coming in, and he said, "You guys are the cream of the crop. You're the intelligentsia. You are smarter than the guys who are, planting corn and raising hogs. You guys are the cream of the crop." And apparently, that caused a big brouhaha. That's what they say, and he resigned as a consequence. He's no spring chicken. He's been governor 4 times. He's got a PhD in philosophy. He went to to England. For his postgraduate studies. But I think the reason why he ran into so much trouble was because the maglev runs through Shizuoka, and he was in opposition to it. So he resigned for a couple of reasons. I think the public reason is because he kind of was disrespectful to the normal people who live in his prefecture. I don't think that's exactly the case. But in any event, he resigns, so that opens the door for an election, just like the by-election does, for governor. The by-elections occur once every 6 months for people who have passed away, or they gave up their seat, or they were ejected from the parliament. And in that 6-month period, they have a 10-day election period. For governor, the governor resigns or dies or something happens to him, immediately they have a race for governor, and that race is, I think, maybe 17 days. So that race kicked off on Thursday, and once it kicks off, the candidates announce themselves, and those are the candidates that will be running the race. So right now there are 6 candidates. The LDP, it's somewhat similar to what we saw in Nagasaki and in Tokyo. The LDP is not putting out their own candidate. They are backing a candidate, but he's not coming from the LDP. He's not fully endorsed by the LDP. He is endorsed. He's backed by them. He's supported by them, but he's not from the LDP. He's actually a former, let me see, he's a vice governor, um, former vice governor of the prefecture. He's also a bureaucrat from uh, the Internal Affairs Agency. So he's got some punch, but he's running against five other candidates. He is the LDP favorite, but their other candidates are coming from coalition members. The former mayor of Hamamatsu, for example, is being backed by the Constitutional Democratic Party and the Democratic Party of the People. Komeito is strangely silent in endorsing these candidates. Komeito has actually said, we don't see a difference between the LDP backed independent um, individual who is running. His name is Omura, he's 60 years old, and the fellow who is being endorsed by the Constitutional Democratic Party, the former mayor of Hama. We don't see much difference in them, so we're not endorsing either one of them. So what that means is when the vote comes up in 15 days, it'll be on a Sunday, um, the Komeito will tell their members, who generally vote in block and like an army very, very consistently, vote with your own convictions. If you like this guy, vote for him. So there's no instructions coming from Komeito. The, the issue here is that if the LDP backed candidate, he's not fully endorsed, and probably it was his choice. I don't want to be fully endorsed by the LDP because look what happened in the by elections. But if the LDP backed candidate doesn't win, then that's kind of four in a row. And I think within the LDP, they are considering this race for governor to be kind of like that. It's a vote for the LDP. So the whole dynamics with regard to how people feel about the LDP is suffering, and the prime minister is in a bit of a pickle. He's in a bit of a pickle because he wants to continue being prime minister, and there are few opportunities for him to ensure that he continues. The first and the most obvious one is the race for the LDP presidency that is in the end of September. The other opportunity that he has is to call for a snap election and to come out clean or to receive some sort of a national endorsement of his policies and then remain as prime minister. The problem with that, though, is that there are two ways to do that. One is the opposition joins forces and they say, we don't have confidence in this prime minister, and let's close down the House. The second way is that the prime minister, on his own volition, closes down the House and opens up for general election. In that situation, the prime minister also, since he's a member of the lower house, also has to run for election. He will guaranteed he will be reelected again. But his position as prime minister disappears as a consequence of the election. Within 30 days of the election, the Diet needs to come together, and since it's a parliamentary democracy, it's the Diet members who select the prime minister. So if the LDP holds the majority vote, and by far it's the largest political party, so it's not 51%, it's just the largest number of votes, then their candidate becomes prime minister. Even if the prime minister closes down the House and the LDP loses, 40 or 50 seats, which is conceivable, they still would be the largest political party in the Diet. And Mr. Kishida, well, that's not accurate. The LDP would be able to select who the prime minister is. So now we're in a little bit of a pickle with Mr. Kishida because the LDP would presumably select who their president is, but in the defeat of maybe 60 members, 50 members of the LDP, the knives will be fully out of the sheaths, and the contenders for prime minister will be coming out of the bushes in droves. And we know who those contenders are. In fact, if you watch the video that Maya is working on to release tomorrow, the LDP in troubled waters, we published in that video a list of potential candidates for prime minister. It's a long list. It's 5 months old. And the entire dynamic of who's in first, who's on second, who's on third has completely changed. And that's just in a very short period of 5 months. So it is possible that should the prime minister call a general election, and the people who bet on this sort of thing are saying that this is his choice to do. This is his last chance. He should close down the House, realign things, take either the blame or the benefit of realigning the LDP, even if the LDP is going to lose 30 or 40 seats in this kind of an election. If he waits until September, it could be even worse. There's a lot more that could happen. And many of the people who follow this sort of thing think that between now and that period of time, there are more bad things that could happen than good things. So the Diet session will end on June 23rd. The Diet needs to be in session for the Prime Minister to close down the House. The election for governor of Tokyo is in July 7th. If the Prime Minister closed down the House during this session, before the 23rd, it is possible, maybe with an extension of the Diet, that the election for governor and the election for all of the houses, all of the seats in the lower house could occur on the same Sunday. So it's kind of difficult to say right now, but that's why we have this show, to give you information on what's going on and how to predict and foresee these sort of events. So one of the things to watch, and we have a little bit of time left, is if there is an extension of the Diet to pass bills, for example, using as an excuse the reform legislation or the ethics committee to finish their investigations, that sort of thing. If they extend the Diet, then that will be one of the tea leaves that are going to tell you that that's pretty much on the schedule. The other thing that's happened over the week is the strengthening of the yen. You'll remember that there was an intervention, most likely by the Bank of Japan, purchasing billions and billions of dollars worth of yen and recalibrating. It hit 160 2 weeks ago, sent a shockwave throughout the ministry and the Bank of Japan, and they intervened with a massive amount of money. We really don't know who and how they did it. The government is obligated to report on that, but they're only obligated to report on it in their formal filings, which is due at the end of the month. So nobody's taking blame or credit for it, but it's such a huge intervention that the most obvious entity is the Bank of Japan. We'll know that later, but we've also reported that the ministers from South Korea and Japan went to Washington, D.C. There was an economic council meeting 2 weeks ago, and they pled with the United States and with the other members about the weakness of the yen and the weakness of the Korean won as well. And we're told, just sit tight. You can't do any intervention on your own because it's not going to work. And I think the Japanese, at least, couldn't stand it any longer. When it hit 160, they jumped in and intervened in the market. And the yen today is at 155, so it did have an impact. Let's see how long that lasts. But let's continue to watch that. Real household consumption has been falling. It's been falling for the last 13 months consecutively. This last month, the reports on March say that the consumption fell 1.2% in that 1 month, year on year. Real wages, although there's been this push to increase wages for the Japanese workers in large industries and the small industries and mom and pop shows, increase those wages. Even though they have done that, real wages have fallen 2.4% for the 24th straight month. So although the prices or the wages continue to increase, the prices inflicted by inflation and the cost of goods has increased even more. So people are poorer than they used to be. And if an election were to happen, people are going to blame the prime minister for that. The other thing that's come up, we've been asked about this a couple of times, excuse me, the new yen bills. So denominations of Japanese currency are from, they have the Ichi-yen coin, the 1 yen coin, the 5 yen coin, the 100 yen coin, the 1,000 yen bill, the 5,000 yen bill, and the 10,000 yen bill. Those the bills themselves are going to be revamped. The 500 yen coin has already been put into circulation, a new one, but these bills will go into circulation in July, very shortly. The old bills will still be used. You can change them in, or you can continue to use them. But the circulation will now be bolstered by three new bills. And let me see. I don't know how deeply people are interested. Maybe in the Q&A we can go into whose pictures are on the individual bills and what that potentially means or what signal that comes out as. But the bills will include new security, a 3D hologram to prevent counterfeit bills. I am not aware that there's a huge issue on counterfeit bills from Japan. I know that there has been in the past a huge issue with counterfeit $20 and $100 bills in the United States. And the United States went through the same process, embedding a lot of new technology into the paper currency, or in the United States, cloth currency. So that is, uh, let's talk about that later if you're more deeply interested in that. The other thing that's come up just this last week is a potential trilateral meeting between Japan, Korea, South Korea, and China. That's a pretty big deal. It's been talked about in the past. The trial balloon goes up and then it comes down. It's shot down, typically because China is not so pleased with either Korea or Japan. They're still not pleased with Japan. There's probably maybe 40 members of the parliament that are visiting Taiwan to attend the inauguration of the new president there, and China doesn't like that, so they're holding their nose a little bit. There could be a trilateral. Let me see. I think it's scheduled for. It's coming up. I think it might be, in fact, even before this month is out. So that's very rapid. So we'll keep our eye on that. That's about it for me, Maya. There's other things going on, and I apologize for being a little bit distracted with trying to hold up the camera and also stay on the boat as well. But it is now that you've turned on your microphone, I'm hearing this background noise. It sounds like a fan or something on your end.
I'm sorry,
Or
there are no fans here. And well, you usually say this, but I believe that this is, well, just what happens. And another thing is that, well, I can hear this really very, I mean, and not only me, I guess, quite a few other people. So
gosh,
maybe that's not the thing. Could you please unplug the mic and see how it goes there? Maybe it
sure.
will be a little bit, yes.
Let's try that. How about that?
Yes, your voice is a little bit stronger, even though the yes, the wind is still there. Okay, this tells me that we'll have to change the mic for the next session.
Okay.
And okay, yes. All right, so Timothy, we have quite a few questions, so let's go straight into them. So the first one is actually for last week. We have people commenting on a lot of wind. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing you, but I think I'll just change my location a little bit.
All right.
What was the question again?
No, I'm going to read it to you just now.
Okay.
Well, let me go there. And the first one is okay. So, do other countries? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Do other countries have an interest and influence in the value of the yen, and can they exercise any influence as political actors in its appreciation or depreciation?
Um, Kind of yes, but kind of no. I think the yen, the value of the yen, the reason why the yen is falling is because of what's going on in the United States. The interest rate pursued by the federal government is about 5.8%, and the interest rate pursued by the Japanese government is 0.01%. And so through arbitration, money will flow towards that country's currency that gives them the biggest bang for the buck, and it's not Japan's. So that's part of the reason. The other part of the reason is that there's a momentum that is generated there when people are purchasing yen or selling yen. And when you sell yen because you're going to another market that has a better currency, it creates a momentum, and then your currency continues to get weaker because people are flowing out, and it's a momentum issue. So other countries um, in coalition, like with the South Koreans going to the United States and saying, could you please do something about your currency and your interest rates, and being poked in the eye. Uh, yeah, it, different countries have attempted to do that. For example, by increasing their gold reserves and tying their currency to gold. But that's a completely different issue than what I think the questioner is asking. If I didn't
Okay,
didn't respond to that, please, you know, maybe ask the person who's asking the question to clarify that.
sure. Okay, thank you for that. Another question also from last week is provided that CDP gains more seats in the House, the lower house, will electoral reform be in the CDP's agenda, the Constitutional Democratic Party's agenda?
Electro- Electoral reform,
Yes, electoral reform. So,
and I guess that means electoral reform means changing the election districts.
well,
What does
I
electoral reform mean?
we have not received any elaboration on this question. So, but maybe, or maybe
Okay,
we can ask. Okay.
okay. So the whole point here is that the Constitutional Democratic Party wants to be the party in power.
Mm-hmm.
It has said, as a consequence of them winning these three races, the leader of the Constitutional Democratic Party says, we want to be the party in leadership without any coalition. But they can't do that. He's actually said, if the Constitutional Democratic Party does not win 150 seats, I think they are at 98 right now, compared to the LDP's 258 or something. If the if my party doesn't get 150, seats in the next general election, I will resign. He said that before. So he wants to take over power. He is already the largest opposition party. Constitutional, not electoral reform. If it means that the the uh, the Constitutional Democratic Party receives more seats, then he's for it. But I think that's the only reason why anybody would plead for electoral reform. But electoral reform it's a long issue. It takes a lot of time. We're right now we haven't fully implemented 1010. Most people remember what 1010 is. 1010 is removing 10 seats from the lower, least populated areas throughout Japan and put those 10 seats in the more populated. So that gerrymandering has occurred. It hasn't been implemented in all of the election districts. It needs one more election for it to come into fruition. And that whole process there has taken 7 years. So electoral reform, it's a pretty big issue.
Right. Okay, so thank you for the answer. And moving to LinkedIn now. So we have Rich Young. So he's asking about your comments on whether the defense developments here might impact the Japanese national security. And also, so he says, could you please comment on the AUKUS involvement and the relations with the USA?
Wow, that's a big one, Rich. So I think if you've been following this program, we report on it a lot, not because I'm overly interested in it, but the Constitution says that Japan cannot participate in offensive activities. It can't produce offensive weapons. Certainly, it can't produce and sell for export offensive weapons. It is doing all of that right now. And the status of forces agreement that I think people are familiar with between the United States and Japan, it allows the United States to occupy land and house soldiers, and for the Japanese government to pay for some of this defense umbrella that is provided by the United States. That status of forces agreement is being replicated with Australia, with France, with England, and other countries. Even the Philippines has got some flavor of bilateral sharing of forces that 5 years ago would have been unheard of. So, with the prime minister boosting the defense spending from 1% to 2% of GDP, a lot of things flow from that. So, with the Australia, UK, United States alignment, the Japanese are involved in that. There was a report just this last week that the Australians, as a consequence of this new development of relations, military relations with Australia, Australia is thinking of purchasing Australia Japanese built frigates, military frigates. So these are shipbuilding by Mitsubishi Heavy for frigates that are being built by the Japanese, for the Japanese, for the protection of the Japanese, that are being facilitated with high-end technology. And these ships, these frigates, these potential battleships, are of such a quality that they are attractive to the Australians, who, number one, under the AUKUS agreement that you just talked about, Rich, the first point of that agreement is to build a submarine fleet for Australia. So Australia is going to get a huge submarine fleet, probably 15, 20 submarines. It's a long-term project for them. And because of Japan's participation, perhaps Japan will share with that, developing frigates and selling their frigates to Australia. So the impact here is that while Japan pursues a peacetime constitution, the theory is that, like Switzerland, it won't be a target of attack by hostile forces. But given the realities of the region that we're in, if Japan doesn't do anything, it is more likely to become a victim of circumstances if it doesn't get its act together. So I think what they've done is they've come to the conclusion that this component of the Constitution needs to be changed, and we need to be more active in defending and providing first strike capabilities. We're in this arrangement with the Italians and the Brits to produce this new age jet fighter that will come on in probably 2035 or so. So these are very obviously offensive weapons that are being injected into the mix. The prime minister, just to go back a little bit more, the prime minister, when he became prime minister, said, I'm going to address the constitutional revision in my term. I'm going to do that. And this diet term ends in less than 2 months. There's been there's always been a committee by the LDP to revise the Constitution and try and get Komeito in agreement and other opposition parties. It hasn't made any progress, and it's unlikely to be an issue that will be addressed in this diet session. So it's one of those other things that the prime minister promised that he's just not going to be able to perform on. But inevitably, this march towards more militarism, more offensive capabilities, exporting these arms, developing a military industrial complex in Japan, it is happening right now. It's just not talked about very much.
Yes, and well, if you mentioned that there is a possibility of having an election this year, even before we get into 2025, and also we know that a lot of basically, well, the LDP is expecting and expected to lose up to 60 seats at that point, and that if they lose that majority in the lower house, they might team up not only with Komeito but with Ishin, which also probably says a lot about moving towards the militarization of. I don't like this term at all, but towards the militarization of
Yep.
say the constitution, the country, and the economy to a certain extent. And also, I think that some of the major outlets here they have already reported that because of these contracts that you talked about just now, the Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and also the other companies that produce these vessels and well some other equipment are going to see actually close to not really 50% increase in revenue, but quite a large increase in their revenues this year, starting this year, actually. Not really, we're not talking about the next year or even, 2026. So it is happening for good or for bad. We don't know at the moment. Hopefully, it's not going to be for, for the detriment of Japan, but yeah, who knows really.
Well, Toyota reported their record-breaking profits for this year, and
Mm-hmm.
overall, the Japanese economy is dependent on automobiles, the production of automobiles, automobile parts, and
Mm-hmm.
services. It really is a huge portion of the Japanese economy, and the central government, on the one hand, they love that. On the other hand, they don't like it because it's everything is skewed towards automobiles, and what they need is another industry. They were hoping it might be AI or chips. They've got these the two initiatives going on in Kumamoto and in Hokkaido, but the defense industry. I mean, overall, if the Japanese build defense equipment and offensive capabilities at the same quality level that Toyota produces cars, they'll sell like hotcakes. And so the prime minister is really bent on trying to develop more revenue. I mean, it's what we talked about. The yen is increasingly weak. The economy is down. People are trying to earn more money, but the cost of goods is going up. So he's struggling. Where can I get another industry going? It's not going to be airplanes. We've tried airplanes, and the United States gets really mad because they dominate the airplane industry. We've tried it. We're building jets. Honda's building jets in Tennessee. You might remember the prime minister visited the factory there. Um, Not Tennessee, was it? North Carolina, perhaps. I forget. But in any event, they're looking, they're searching for this new engine for the economy, and the most obvious one is defense, except for this niggly issue of the Constitution. So there's this constant battle for the LDP, not only to maintain 50% or more in both houses, but also either through independently or through a coalition to exceed 2/3. Because once they have 2/3, then they can begin this initiative to revise the Constitution. But before that, it's already a dead issue. They're not even going to get to the first base on that. So yes, I sense this growing push towards developing a military economy, a military base in the Japanese economy.
Well, yes, we'll see. Right. And then going back to, yes, going back to the political fund scandal, once again, another question from Rich Young. It is, the question is about Yoshitaka Ikeda. So the first member who was arrested in relation to this scandal. Could you please tell us something specific or anything specific about him? And if we cannot deliver on this today, maybe we can actually answer the question next week. So, your thoughts on this?
Rich, please remind me, Ikeda, what is the scandal that you're referring to there?
Also, he is the first person of the LDP who was arrested by the police in relation to the
The
political fund
kickback.
scandal.
Okay.
Yes, so he got about what 430 million yen or something like that within a year as kickbacks. So
Okay.
yeah.
Right. So there are three members that suffered the same fate. They were all three of them were indicted, and uh, it stopped there. It was kind of the hemorrhage, and the LDP quickly got their act together, and they put together the committee and talked about who is guilty, and they listed up how much money they got, and then the accountants for the Abe faction was arrested, and also the Nikai faction accountant was arrested. So that's kind of where it stopped. You'll remember this is this question is also from Rich. So Rich, you're really watching this stuff. Thank you. So you'll remember that there was an investigation by the public prosecutor's office, and it all exploded. This was probably in January, February, and there was so much activity. No, it was before the new year actually, and there was so much activity. We were thinking that the public prosecutor's office would be moving more aggressively, and then the diet session started in January, and that put an end to the public prosecutors. And then everything was done internally by the LDP, which culminated just before the prime minister went to Washington, D.C., and he said, these guys are guilty. And among these guys, we're going to punish these guys, these maybe 20, 21 people. The first two are, we're going to ask them to resign from the LDP, and everybody else gets some form of punishment. And the Constitutional Democratic Party and everybody else is saying, what about everybody else? Wait a minute. What happened to everybody else that took the money, put it in their pocket, didn't pay the taxes, and including you, Mr. Prime Minister, you were involved in this too. He wrapped it all up and then went to Washington, D.C. So I don't know if that clearly responds to your question, but with regard to maybe it has some impact on it, but in the Shizuoka governor's race, there are three members of the LDP in Shizuoka who had to resign within the last two election cycles because of funny money or because of sex or because of something in Shizuoka. So I think that responds to why the LDP doesn't have a firm candidate. The LDP is not promoting somebody as this is our guy, because three of them in the last 5 years were kicked out because of philandering and because of money issues. So maybe if that didn't respond to it, Rich, I'll revisit it next week, and I apologize.
Right. Okay. So thank you, Rich. Please let us know whether you need. Okay. Yes. So civis pacem parabellum. Okay. Thank you, Tim. Okay. Great. Thank you. And I also have Yuka with me in Clubhouse. Yuka, good morning or good evening to you, actually. And I wonder whether I have exhausted your patience by keeping you waiting.
No. I've enjoyed listening to you guys always.
Always, yes.
Ever, forever and ever. I have a sort of quick question on the sort of system in which that Japanese sort of constitutions, or not a constitution, maybe clause. It's how it's going to be changed. So in the other room, we're talking about joint custody issue, and it is my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong. So I think it's passed, like a lower house, right?
Yeah.
And then, so the next step will be the upper house will decide. Am I right? And then, okay, my question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is actually, so how this sort of change in the clause will be instituted? So, like either like a subdivision, sub clause to this, change in the law. Yes, now it's going to be a joint custody is going to be allowed. However, it's not automatic. The both parents will get custody 50-50, but there are a lot of conditions will be attached. Let's say, the one spouse may have some like a mental issue, or the other spouse have history in the domestic abuse. So it's just like not a simple change on the flip, right? It's a single to joint custody. so the law can have a lot of provisions. Am I right on this? Yes, please correct me. And I'm sure. Okay, I shouldn't have said. Am I right? I said, am I wrong on this? Thank you.
Thanks for your very brief question. So I'll
No, I
answer it.
don't go on, but I just stopped at the first phase.
So, so the bill has passed. It is now law. And so the way things work in Japan is the bills that we talk about, for example, the economic security clearance that was just passed on Thursday, or the joint custody, or any of these bills, they're passed in this session and they become active next year, April 1st. So usually it says this bill will become effective on April 1st of next year. And between now and that time, the ministry that is in charge of the application of that particular law is busy revising all of the regulations and the rules. It's not quite law, it's how law is implemented. And the bureaucrats are in charge of that. The members of parliament are in charge of the policy of what, is it joint custody? Is it sole custody? What is, and the law, when it's changed, the language is very, very brief. It's very sharp. It's very concise. And then the bureaucrats take that language and then they change the rules and regulations and the stipulations. It takes them a year to do that. Sometimes it takes them longer, and they don't always get it right. So sometimes the law doesn't need to be revised, but you need lobbyists, or you need case law, or people who have been harmed as a consequence of the poor application, to change the rules and regulations. So that's what most lobbyists do. They help change the rules and regulations as applied to a certain person or individual. Applying to change the law is a much bigger deal. As a lobbyist myself, we never have been requested change the law. This law is too onerous. It's too illegal. Please change the law. That's a 6 or 7 year prospect, and it's very rare for an individual company or an individual to feel so so dedicated to change, to spend that much money over a 6 year period to change the law. So getting back to the application of those rules and regulations, there are some of them in the law that will be grandfathered in. So certain situations that existed in the past will be grandfathered into the new law, so that it has a certain time to kind of disappear over time. And then there are other stipulations in the new law that retroactively affect issues that have gone on in the past, and maybe there have been victims as a consequence of that, and then they can appeal to the grandfathered clause or the retroactive clauses in the new rules and regulations. It's not typically in the law, but the law might say certain of these components will be retroactively applied depending on the circumstances. Personally, I think it's not going to be a huge change. I think there's still going to be complaints about, physical violence and my wife is crazy, and these typical arguments that really did resonate and allowed people to scurry away with sole custody of the children. You're still going to get those cases. And so the application really depends on the judges and the lawyers and the family courts. So, yeah, the jury is still out on that. It doesn't go into effect until April 1st of next year. So we'll continue to watch that. But this is a big issue. It's a very delicate issue. It's an issue that I've been following and been involved in for half a dozen years. So I'll continue to follow it.
Thank you. So let's say I'm going through a divorce, God forbid, okay? And just an example. Then we have like a kid, and so when so the couple, do they still have to fight for it if they want to have a
No,
50-50 custody? No.
no. So typically the law only comes into effect if there's a controversy. The courts and the lawyers, they all say, look, you're normal people. You can deal with it yourself. You can make your own agreement about how you're going to have visitation, how you're going to deal with it. The problem comes up when one person says, I'm being violated, my rights are being violated, and I'm going to sue you, God damn it. And then the application of the law comes in. In the vast majority of cases, people say, yes, I hate you, I don't want to live with you anymore, but I don't want my life to be complicated, and your children love you and they need you, and I don't want you to be out of their lives. So let's have this kind of an arrangement. And it might not be totally satisfactory, but you don't have to get the judges and the courts involved. And people know, people read, books and magazines, and they hear about how the stories and how the law is applied, and they know what the good points are and the bad points. But if it becomes like, she's a real crazy bitch, or he really beats he beats the kids and he beats the wife and they had to escape. These are real stories too. I mean, they're valid reasons to seek, protection from the family court, protection through the family courts and through the law. So, yeah, if you're in a situation where you're going to get divorced, you have full range of options that are not basically, endorsed by the law as a private citizen. But if somebody feels like they've been violated, you had an agreement and you didn't follow it, or every time you want to see your child, they have a cold or they have a piano lesson, or, please send me the money and you didn't send me the money, that sort of thing. It's the same story over and over and over again.
Okay, thank you.
Did that respond somewhat?
Yeah, that's responded a lot. Thank you.
Yay! Thank you, Yuka.
Oh, by the way, I have to say, not, I'm gonna Google this, but you always say sell like a hot cake or pancake. I gotta figure that out where this expression come from, but you don't have to respond to it. Thank you. I'll Google it. Thank
Right. Okay. Thank you, Yuka. Yeah, I have been learning a lot through, I mean, vocabulary through these sessions as well. So thank you, Timothy, for, well, what's that? Incentivizing.
Colorful, very colorful.
Colorful, yes.
The
Incentivizing.
politicians are kissing babies, and yes.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so thank you, Yuka and Timothy. I think that I can let you go now because, yes, there are no more questions on LinkedIn, Facebook, and in Clubhouse either at the moment. So I can see that you're also very impatient to go sailing again. So thank you for the. Thank you for
it's
the.
not that I don't enjoy participating in this briefing and responding to the questions and talking about something that, I do every day. But it is Sunday, and yeah.
Yes, and you are on the boat, and the boat is waiting, to. Yes, okay. So I appreciate your time with us. Thank you very much for that. And to everybody who watched us, apologies for the sound quality in the beginning of the session. We'll be working on this so that next time we don't have these challenges. Also, if you have watched even part of this on YouTube or LinkedIn, hit follow or hit subscribe, and thank you very much for doing that. Thanks a lot. And that's all for today, Timothy. We'll be here once again. We'll be here once again next
for the questions
Sunday.
and for participating.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so we'll see you next week once again. Have a great Sunday and also a
Happy
bright new
Mother's
week.
Day.
Yes, happy Mother's Day, indeed.
Thank you. Happy Mother's Day, Maya.
Thank you. Well, I entirely forgot that everybody's still asleep at home, so I just. Okay, yes, great. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, yes, indeed.
Here we go. Woo!